It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. I had just returned home from work, exhausted and ready to unwind. Laura was still at the office, probably drowning in paperwork as usual. I reached for my phone to check the time and noticed a text notification pop up on Laura's screen. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at it. What I saw made my heart drop. It was a message from her colleague Matt, filled with flirtatious remarks and playful emojis. My stomach twisted in knots as I realized this wasn't just harmless banter. It was something more, something that felt like a knife piercing through my chest. I quickly set the phone down, my mind racing. Could this really be happening? Was Laura cheating on me? I felt a mix of disbelief and rage boil within me. How could she do this? We had built a life together, shared dreams, and yet here she was, betraying me with someone from work. As I paced the living room, I tried to wrap my head around it. I thought about all the late nights she spent at the office, the excuses she made, the way she smiled when she talked about Matt. Each memory hit me like a wave, dragging me deeper into despair. But rather than confront her right away, I made a decision. I wouldn't let her get away with this. I needed a plan, a way to make her understand the gravity of her betrayal. It was time for revenge. After that dreadful evening, I hardly slept. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more vengeful than the last. I tossed and turned in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment I saw Laura's phone light up with Matt's messages. The next morning, I woke up determined. I couldn't just sit back and let this betrayal go unpunished. I needed to make Matt pay for his part in this. But how? I had to think outside the box, to craft a plan that would hit them where it hurt. Then it hit me. What if I created a fake profile on a dating site? I could pose as someone else, a woman looking for connection, and lure Matt into my trap. I could make him believe he was talking to someone who was genuinely interested in him, while all the time I'd be collecting evidence of his infidelity. It was the perfect plan, and I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me as I considered the possibilities. I spent the day meticulously creating the profile. I chose the name Kate, crafted a captivating bio, and uploaded a few attractive photos, ones that would catch his eye and entice him to engage. I made sure to keep it mysterious, a little flirty, just enough to draw him in. Once the profile was set up, I started messaging Matt, pretending to be Kate. At first, it felt surreal, like I was stepping into a different life. I initiated small talk, asking about his job and what he enjoyed doing in his free time. To my surprise, he responded quickly, and the conversation flowed easily. He had no idea that the woman he was chatting with was his colleague's husband. As the days went by, my confidence grew. I pushed the boundaries further, flirting a bit more and asking him about his love life. He seemed eager to share, dropping hints about his crush on someone special, someone who was not his wife. It felt like I was peeling back the layers of his facade, and I couldn't help but relish every moment of it. But what excited me the most was the thought of the meeting I had in mind. I would get him to agree to meet in person, and when he arrived, Laura and I would be waiting for him, ready to expose him for the fraud he was. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he realized who he was really dealing with. I was in control now, and there was no turning back. As the week unfolded, I poured myself into the role of Kate. Each conversation with Matt brought me a mix of exhilaration and anticipation. I carefully crafted my responses, making sure to balance flirtation with just the right amount of vulnerability. I knew that if I wanted him to trust me, I had to let him believe I was genuinely interested in him. Every night I waited for the familiar ping of my phone, signaling that Matt had messaged me. He was surprisingly open, sharing stories about his life, his ambitions, and even his thoughts on relationships. I found it both fascinating and infuriating. How could he share so much with someone he barely knew while lying to his wife? I began to subtly steer the conversation towards Laura. I'd ask him what he thought of her, how they got along at work, and even what kind of person he thought she was. Each time, he spoke about her with a mix of admiration and casual detachment, but there was an underlying tension. I could sense he was drawn to the idea of having something more than just a professional relationship with her. It was during one of these conversations that I decided to make my move. I suggested that we should meet up. I carefully crafted the message. I really enjoy our chats, and I'd love to see if we have the same chemistry in person. What do you think? I held my breath, staring at the screen as I waited for his reply. Moments felt like hours, but finally the message came through. He was enthusiastic and suggested a cozy cafe downtown, a place he frequented, where he felt comfortable. Perfect, I typed back, trying to suppress the thrill racing through me. I made arrangements for Laura and me to be there at the same time, hidden from view but close enough to see everything. As the meeting day approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when all my planning would come to fruition. I imagined the look of shock on Matt's face when he saw me sitting across from him with Laura by my side. It was going to be monumental. Each passing hour intensified my anticipation. I was ready to reveal the truth, and nothing would stop me from executing my plan. I would make sure that both Matt and Laura understood the consequences of betrayal, and I would finally regain the control I had lost. The day of the meeting arrived, and I woke up with a mix of adrenaline and anxiety coursing through my veins. I could hardly focus on anything else. I was fixated on the plan I had crafted, and each moment felt charged with anticipation. I checked my phone repeatedly, making sure I hadn't missed any last-minute messages from Matt. Laura had no idea what was about to unfold. She had agreed to accompany me to the cafe under the pretense that we were meeting up with friends. I had told her I wanted to share something exciting with her, an idea for a new project I was thinking about. I could see the curiosity in her eyes, but I knew that she was completely oblivious to my true intentions. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting time, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. I chose my outfit carefully, a stylish but understated look that would help me blend into the cafe's crowd while still appearing approachable. I wanted to look confident but not flashy, just like Kate would. When we arrived at the cafe, I scanned the room. It was a cozy place, filled with the rich aroma of coffee and the murmur of conversations. I spotted a corner table with a perfect view of the entrance, and I gestured for Laura to sit down. I knew this would be a pivotal moment in our relationship, and I wanted to ensure we were in the right spot to witness Matt's entrance. "Do you think they'll be here soon?" Laura asked, glancing at her phone, oblivious to the fact that we were about to confront her lover. "Yeah, I'm sure they're just running a bit late," I replied, forcing a casual tone. Inside, my heart raced at the thought of what was about to happen. Minutes dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity. I watched the door with laser focus, mentally rehearsing the moment when Matt would walk in. I couldn't help but imagine the expression on his face when he realized he had been lured into a trap. The anticipation fueled my anger and determination. Finally, the door swung open and Matt walked in. He looked exactly as I remembered from our conversations, confident with an air of casual charm. He scanned the room, and for a split second, I could see the excitement in his eyes as he spotted Kate across the cafe. My heart raced as I saw him approach our table, the same carefree smile plastered on his face that he had used in our chats. He had no idea what was in store for him. "Hey, Kate, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. He didn't notice me at first. His eyes were locked on Laura, who was blissfully unaware of the betrayal unfolding before her. "Hi, Matt," I finally chimed in, letting a smirk creep onto my face as he turned his head to see me sitting there. His smile faltered, and confusion washed over his features. "James? Surprise," I replied, unable to hide my satisfaction. "You didn't think I'd let you get away with this, did you?" Matt's eyes darted back to Laura, who was now realizing that something was terribly wrong. The color drained from her face as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. "James, what's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky. I could feel the tension in the air as the reality of the situation sank in. "Oh, just a little game of trust, sweetheart. It seems your colleague here has been rather friendly with you," Matt stammered, desperately trying to come up with an excuse. I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," I interrupted. "You're the one who thought it was okay to flirt with another man's wife while pretending to be my friend. How does it feel to be caught in your own web of lies?" Laura looked between us, her expression a mix of shock and guilt. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "Believe it, Laura," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choice, and now it's time for you both to face the consequences." The cafe had quieted, and I could feel the eyes of other patrons on us, some pulling out their phones to record the spectacle. I felt a rush of power as I continued to confront Matt, exposing him for the fraud he was. "Do you really think this is going to end well for you?" I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. "You'll never look at her the same way again, and your reputation is toast." Matt's face turned crimson as he stammered for words. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "Of course you didn't," I replied sarcastically. "That's the excuse everyone uses when they get caught. But the truth is out now." I turned to Laura, who was still trying to process everything. "I hope you realize the depth of your betrayal, Laura. This isn't just about you and him. This is about everything we built together." With every word I spoke, I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was the reckoning I had been waiting for, and as Matt stood there, exposed and embarrassed, I knew I had taken control of the situation. The truth had come to light, and there was no turning back now. As the confrontation unfolded, the cafe buzzed with whispers. Patrons leaned closer, some straining to catch every word of our exchange, while others discreetly recorded the spectacle on their phones. I could feel the weight of their gazes pressing down on us, amplifying the intensity of the moment. Matt, caught off guard and visibly shaken, fumbled for words. "You have to understand, I didn't mean to hurt you," he blurted, desperation lacing his voice. "It was just a harmless crush, I swear." "Harmless?" I echoed, incredulous. "You thought it was harmless to flirt with my wife? You thought she wouldn't get hurt? You're delusional." I could see the embarrassment burning in his cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the betrayal I felt. I had never been one to play games, yet here I was, orchestrating this elaborate setup, watching him squirm under the spotlight he had created. Laura remained silent, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. "James, please," she began, her voice trembling. "Please what?" I snapped, cutting her off. "Please excuse you? Please tell you that everything's okay." "No, Laura, you've crossed a line that can't be undone." As I spoke, I noticed a few people had started to gather, drawn in by the drama unfolding before them. Some were shaking their heads, others were nodding in agreement. I could feel the energy in the room shift, the public outrage against Matt growing stronger as they processed the betrayal. "Look at this place," I said, gesturing around the cafe. "Do you see how many people are witnessing this? You're not just ruining your own reputation, you're dragging Laura down with you." Matt shifted uncomfortably, casting furtive glances around the room. "You don't have to do this. We can talk about it somewhere private," he suggested, attempting to regain some semblance of control. "Why? So you can spin your lies in peace?" I challenged. "No, this needs to be out in the open. You deserve to be exposed for what you are, a coward who thinks he can toy with people's lives without consequences." With every word, I felt the rush of empowerment wash over me. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The adrenaline fueled me, and I could see how captivated the audience was by the unfolding drama. They were on my side, witnessing a man being held accountable for his actions. "Do you really think this will end well for you?" I continued, directing my gaze back to Matt. "You'll carry this stigma with you. Your friends will find out. Your career will take a hit. You'll be the laughingstock of the office." As I spoke, the weight of the moment pressed down on all of us. I could feel the eyes of the cafe patrons piercing through the air, and it felt surreal to have so many witnesses. Finally, the manager approached us, looking concerned. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, glancing between us, trying to gauge the situation. "Everything's just perfect," I replied, my voice laced with sarcasm. "We're just having a little family reunion." The manager's expression shifted from concern to realization as he recognized the seriousness of the situation. "Perhaps we should take this outside," he suggested diplomatically, clearly wanting to avoid a full-blown scene in his establishment. "Why should we?" I shot back. "Let them see this. Let everyone know what kind of man he is." But Matt, sensing the tide was against him, nodded reluctantly. "Fine, let's take this outside," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As we moved towards the door, I caught glimpses of the patrons shaking their heads, some even murmuring to each other. It felt cathartic to know that they were witnessing this betrayal unfold, a scandal that would ripple through the office and beyond. Once outside, the sun hit my face, and I took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air. It felt like stepping out of a storm and into a new world, a world where I was finally in control. Now that we're out here, let's finish this, I said, turning to face Matt. You can't run away from what you've done. You have to own up to it. He stood there, shifting uncomfortably, but I could see the resolve begin to crumble in his eyes. The facade of confidence had vanished, replaced by a sheepish expression that made him look smaller than he ever had before. I'm sorry, James. I really am. It just happened, he stammered, clearly realizing the magnitude of his actions. No, it didn't just happen, I snapped back. You chose to act on your impulses. You chose to betray me and Laura. There are consequences, and you're about to find out what they are. As I prepared to deliver my final blow, I glanced back at Laura, who was watching with tears in her eyes. I didn't know how this would affect us moving forward, but I knew that at that moment, I was taking a stand. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and making sure that neither of them would forget this day. With the bustling sounds of the cafe fading behind us, I felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on my shoulders. The sun cast long shadows as we stood outside, facing each other in the light of day, surrounded by curious onlookers. This was it, the confrontation that would determine the course of our lives. I took a step closer to Matt, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and determination. You think an apology is enough? I asked, my voice steady but laced with intensity. You think you can just say you're sorry and everything will go back to normal? It doesn't work that way. He opened his mouth to respond but hesitated, his expression shifting from defensiveness to realization. I never wanted to hurt you, James. I didn't think it was a big deal. Not a big deal? I interrupted, incredulous. You've been flirting with my wife. That's a huge deal. You crossed a line that you can't just brush off because it's convenient for you. You're a coward, Matt, hiding behind sweet messages and stolen moments, thinking you could get away with it. Laura stood off to the side, her hands clasped together, the weight of the situation evident in her expression. James, she started, but I raised my hand to silence her. No, Laura, this isn't your moment to speak. You've had your chance, and look where it got us. I turned back to Matt, my gaze unwavering. What were you thinking? Did you really believe I wouldn't find out? I thought it was harmless fun, he replied weakly, but I could see the cracks forming in his bravado. I never thought it would go this far. Of course you didn't, I shot back. You never think about the consequences, do you? You just wanted to have your cake and eat it too. I stepped back, trying to rein in my emotions. As much as I wanted to scream, to rage against the betrayal that had rocked my world, I needed to remain focused. I had the upper hand, and I was determined to wield it effectively. Here's the thing, Matt, I continued, my voice lowering but gaining an edge. You've made a fool of yourself, and you've made a fool of Laura. You think this is just going to blow over? You think your little fling with my wife won't come with repercussions? He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the ground. What do you want me to say? I messed up. I'm sorry. I'll tell Laura the truth and we can all move on. No, I said firmly. That's not enough. You need to understand the damage you've done, not just to me but to our marriage. I want you to think about every moment you spent whispering sweet nothings to her, every time you made her smile while I was left in the dark. You've stolen that from me, and you need to face it. Laura finally found her voice, stepping forward. James, please, let's talk about this later. I never meant for any of this to happen. No, Laura, I replied, my tone sharp. You don't get to play the victim here. You made your choices, and you're going to own them. I turned back to Matt. And you're going to be the one to explain to her why everything is falling apart. He looked at me, his facade of confidence completely shattered. I don't know how to do that, he admitted, his voice cracking. Good, I replied, feeling a surge of satisfaction. Maybe this will finally teach you a lesson about the consequences of your actions. You don't get to walk away unscathed. Just then, a couple of passers-by stopped to watch, their expressions a mix of curiosity and sympathy. I could feel the weight of their eyes, amplifying the public nature of our confrontation. This was no longer just about us, it was about everyone witnessing a betrayal unfold in real time. As the tension built, I felt a strange mix of power and vulnerability. I was exposing the raw wounds of our relationship, and while it felt cathartic to confront Matt, I couldn't shake the sadness that was creeping in. From now on, I continued, you'll think twice before playing with someone else's life. You will face the consequences of your actions, Matt. And don't even think about trying to contact Laura again. He nodded slowly, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. I understand. I really messed up, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Good, I said, my voice firm. Now go, before I say something I might regret. Matt turned to leave, walking away with his shoulders slumped, the weight of his guilt evident in every step. As he disappeared down the street, I turned back to Laura, who was still processing everything that had just happened. The tears continued to stream down her face, and for a moment, I felt a pang of empathy. James, she started, but I held up my hand again. Not now, Laura, I said, my voice softer but still firm. We need to talk, but I can't do it while I'm still so angry. I understand, she replied, her voice trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened, and I'm so sorry. I wanted to believe her, but the betrayal was still fresh, the wound too deep. Let's go home, I said finally, the weight of the moment settling in. We'll talk when I'm ready. As we walked back to the car in silence, I couldn't help but think about how our lives had changed in a single day. The confrontation had been necessary, but the road ahead felt uncertain. I had exposed the truth, but at what cost? The drive home was tense and silent, the weight of unspoken words filling the air between Laura and me. I could feel the throbbing ache of betrayal still coursing through me, overshadowing any flicker of hope that might have lingered in the aftermath of our confrontation. I kept my eyes on the road, focusing on each turn and stoplight as if they could distract me from the turmoil swirling in my mind. As we pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I could see the house we had built together, our shared memories etched into every corner. It felt foreign now, a reminder of everything that had been shattered. Once inside, I tossed my keys onto the table and sank into the nearest chair, rubbing my temples as I fought against the urge to scream. Laura stood by the door, her expression a mixture of fear and remorse. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand again, this time more gently. Just give me a minute, I said, closing my eyes as I tried to gather my thoughts. I needed time to process everything, but I knew we couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. After a few moments, I opened my eyes and looked at her. Okay, let's talk, I said, my voice steadier now but still tinged with the pain of the past few hours. I know I hurt you, she began, her voice shaking. I never wanted any of this to happen. It was a mistake, a stupid, reckless mistake. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. You're right, it was a mistake. But it was more than that, Laura. It was a choice you made. You chose to betray me, to betray our marriage. I know, she whispered, her eyes welling up with tears again. I can't take it back. I wish I could. I didn't think about the consequences. I just got caught up in the moment. Caught up in the moment? I repeated, my frustration bubbling to the surface. How do you even get to that point? You were supposed to be my partner, my confidant. Instead, you chose to share your time and attention with him. She lowered her gaze, guilt etched on her features. I was foolish. I let my feelings get out of control. I didn't mean for it to go as far as it did. I promise I'll never let it happen again. What does that even mean? I asked, my voice rising. How can I trust you again after this? You made a choice to deceive me. How can I believe you won't do it again? I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back, she pleaded, stepping closer. I'll cut ties with Matt. I'll be completely open with you. You can see my phone, my messages. I'll do anything. Just please don't give up on us. The desperation in her voice tugged at something deep within me. Part of me wanted to believe her, to imagine a future where we could move past this. But the hurt was still fresh, a raw wound that wouldn't heal overnight. I don't know if I can, I admitted, my voice breaking slightly. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. She reached out, taking my hands in hers, her grip trembling. I love you, James. I never stopped loving you. This was a moment of weakness and I'm so sorry. I'll fight for our marriage if you'll let me. I stared at her, searching her eyes for any hint of deception, but all I saw was pain and regret. I wished I could turn back time. Wished I could erase the memory of today. But I knew that was impossible. The truth hung heavily between us, and I had to decide what to do next. I need time, I finally said, my voice quiet. I need time to think. I don't want to rush into anything, and I don't want to make a decision out of anger. Take all the time you need, she replied softly. I'll be here waiting. As she stepped back, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness wash over me. I didn't want to fight, but I also didn't want to pretend that everything was okay. I'll be in the office, I said, heading toward the door. I needed space to think, to process everything. The weight of the day was still heavy on my shoulders, and I couldn't bear the thought of sitting in silence with her. As I walked away, I felt the familiar pull of anger and hurt. But I also felt something else, a flicker of hope. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. Maybe this wasn't the end. But for now, I needed to figure out what I truly wanted. The path ahead was unclear, and I knew it would take time to navigate the fallout of our shattered trust. The office was a refuge of sorts, a space where I could escape the chaos of my home and gather my thoughts. I sat down at my desk, staring blankly at the computer screen, the hum of the office around me barely registering. Colleagues drifted in and out, engaged in their own conversations, but I felt like I was in a bubble, detached from the world. As I tried to focus on work, my mind kept wandering back to Laura and the confrontation with Matt. I replayed every moment, every word, trying to make sense of it all. Why had she done it? What had driven her to betray me? The questions swirled in my mind like a relentless storm. After an hour of futile attempts to concentrate, I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. I needed clarity, and I knew I wouldn't find it sitting here. I picked up my phone and texted Laura, "Can we talk later?" I wasn't ready to face her yet, but I knew we couldn't avoid the conversation forever. The weight of our situation hung heavily in the air, and I could feel it pressing down on both of us. A response came a few moments later, of course, "Whenever you're ready." I sighed, staring out the window at the bustling street below. The world outside moved on, oblivious to the turmoil I was experiencing. I thought about calling a friend, someone to vent to, but I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems. Instead, I decided to go for a walk, hoping the fresh air would help clear my head. As I strolled through the nearby park, I tried to focus on the sights and sounds around me, the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. But my mind kept drifting back to Laura. I thought about the love we had shared, the dreams we had built together, and the laughter that used to fill our home. Now, those memories felt tainted by betrayal. I found a bench and sat down, resting my elbows on my knees as I gazed at the ground. The weight of the world felt heavy on my shoulders, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was possible to rebuild what had been broken. Could we ever regain that trust? After a while, I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone again, scrolling through our messages. I came across pictures from happier times, vacations, birthdays, simple moments that had once brought joy. Each image was a reminder of what we had and what was now at stake. Suddenly, I felt a surge of determination. I had to confront this head-on, not just for myself but for Laura too. We needed to have an honest conversation about what had happened and what we wanted moving forward. I stood up, feeling more resolute. I had a long road ahead, but I was willing to take it, provided Laura was too. As I made my way back to the office, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where we could rebuild our marriage stronger than before. When I returned home later that evening, I found Laura sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. My heart ached at the sight of her, but I knew we couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady but soft. She nodded, her expression hopeful yet apprehensive. "Yes, please. I've been waiting for you." I sat down across from her, the distance between us still palpable. "I've been thinking about everything," I began. "About us, about what happened. I need you to be honest with me, no more hiding." "Of course," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'll tell you everything." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Why did you do it, Laura? What were you thinking?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I didn't think it would go this far. I was feeling neglected, and Matt. He was just there. It was stupid. I thought I could handle it, but I lost control." "Neglected?" I repeated, my frustration bubbling up again. "We've always had our ups and downs, but I thought we were working through them together." "I know," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But I felt like I was alone. I didn't come to you. I should have, and I regret that more than anything." I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to feel wanted. As she spoke, I felt the walls I had built around my heart beginning to crack. I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes, but the pain of betrayal still lingered. I want to believe you, I said finally, my voice heavy with emotion. But it's going to take time. I need to know that you're committed to making this right. I am, she insisted, her voice earnest. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll be completely transparent. I'll end things with Matt. I want to rebuild our trust. I nodded slowly, processing her words. It won't be easy. I'm not sure how we can move forward, but I'm willing to try. We'll have to be open with each other, even when it's hard. Absolutely, she replied, her voice filled with determination. I'll show you that I can be the wife you deserve. I'll fight for us. As we sat there in silence, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but I was willing to walk it if Laura was too. Together, we might be able to heal the wounds of the past and find our way back to each other. The next few days were filled with a delicate mix of tension and tentative hope. Laura and I navigated our new reality, each moment underscored by the betrayal that had reshaped our lives. We started setting boundaries, trying to carve out a path forward together, but the uncertainty hung in the air like a heavy fog. One evening, as we sat on the couch, I decided it was time to lay down some ground rules. We need to establish some boundaries, I said, turning to Laura. It's crucial if we're going to rebuild trust. Agreed, she replied, her eyes earnest. What do you have in mind? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. First, I need complete transparency. I want to know who you're talking to, what you're doing. I can't have any secrets between us. Of course, she nodded quickly. I'll share everything. You can have access to my phone and social media accounts. I'll even let you know when I'm meeting with friends. Thank you, I said, feeling a small sense of relief. I also think it's important that you cut all ties with Matt. No more texts, no more meetings. It's for both of our sakes. She nodded again, her expression serious. I promise. I'll block him tonight. I know it's the right thing to do, even if it's hard. It is hard, but it's necessary, I replied. We need to prioritize our relationship above all else. I also think we should consider couples therapy. Having a professional guide us through this might help us communicate better. I agree, she said. I've always been open to it, but I never thought we'd actually need it. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. Good, I said, feeling a sense of determination wash over me. And one more thing. I think we should take a break from socializing for a while. We need time to focus on ourselves and heal. Laura's expression softened. That makes sense. I'll gladly step back from our social circle for now. We can rebuild our connection without outside distractions. As we discussed these boundaries, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. We were finally addressing the issues that had been swept under the rug for too long. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the lingering doubts. Would we truly be able to stick to these boundaries? Could we heal from this betrayal? The following day, as Laura prepared to block Matt, I could sense her anxiety. Are you okay? I asked, noticing her fidgeting with her phone. I'm just nervous, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I need to do this, but it feels like I'm cutting off a part of my life. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You are, but it's for the best. You're choosing us, and that's what matters. We're starting fresh, and that requires some sacrifices. She nodded, swallowing hard. You're right. I want to do this. I'm committed to us no matter how hard it is. As she took a deep breath and pressed the button to block Matt, I felt a surge of support for her. This was a significant step in the right direction, and I hoped it would pave the way for deeper healing. That evening, after we'd both settled back into our routine, we found ourselves sitting at the dining table, sharing a quiet dinner. The atmosphere felt lighter than it had in days, but I knew we were still in the early stages of our recovery. Can we talk about how we can improve our communication? I asked, breaking the silence. Definitely, she replied, her eyes lighting up. I've been thinking about that a lot. I realize now how important it is for us to be open with each other. I think we should schedule regular check-ins, I suggested. Maybe once a week we can sit down and discuss how we're feeling, any concerns we have, and just talk. I love that idea, she said, her enthusiasm evident. It'll help us stay connected and address any issues before they escalate. Exactly. I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I want us to feel comfortable sharing our feelings, even if it's uncomfortable. As we finished our dinner, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We were slowly building the foundation for our future, brick by brick. It wouldn't be easy, but we were both willing to put in the effort. Later that night, as we settled into bed, I turned to Laura. I know we have a long way to go, but I believe we can make this work. I believe that too, she said softly, snuggling closer to me. I'm ready to fight for us. And in that moment, as I held her close, I felt a flicker of hope, a sign that perhaps, against all odds, we might find our way back to each other after all. As the days turned into weeks, Laura and I worked diligently on our relationship. Each morning, we would have coffee together, discussing our plans for the day and gradually rebuilding the intimacy we had lost. But beneath the surface, the specter of her betrayal loomed large, casting a shadow over our efforts to reconnect. One Saturday morning, I woke up early, feeling restless. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Laura, and made my way to the living room. The quiet of the house offered a rare moment of solitude, and I found myself lost in thought. The more I pondered our situation, the more I realized that I needed to confront not just the present, but also the past. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through our old messages, looking for clues, anything that might help me understand the build-up to her affair. The more I read, the more I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I noticed how our conversations had shifted over the years, from sweet exchanges to mundane discussions about daily chores. Somewhere along the line, we had lost that spark, and I couldn't help but wonder if Laura had felt that too. After a while, I decided it was time to face the music. I needed to talk to Laura about the past, about the cracks that had formed in our relationship long before Matt entered the picture. I returned to the bedroom, finding her still asleep, her hair cascading over the pillow. I hesitated for a moment, watching her peaceful expression, but I knew I couldn't put off the conversation any longer. "Laura," I said softly, nudging her shoulder gently. "It's time to wake up." She stirred, blinking groggily as she sat up. "What time is it?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Just after 8. "I was thinking we should talk about everything," I replied, trying to keep my tone calm. Her expression shifted to one of concern. "Okay, what do you want to discuss?" "Everything that led to, well, everything that happened," I said, my heart racing. "I think it's important for us to understand how we got here." Laura nodded slowly, her eyes filled with understanding. "You're right. I've been thinking about it too." After a quick breakfast, we settled into the living room. I could feel the tension building as I prepared to dive into the conversation. "I guess I want to start with what changed between us," I said, searching her face for any signs of defensiveness. "When did we stop communicating? When did we become more like roommates than partners?" She took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. "I think it started gradually. Life got busy, work, responsibilities, everything. We stopped prioritizing each other, and I didn't even realize how far apart we were drifting until it was too late." I felt a pang of sadness at her words. I get that. I know I wasn't perfect either. I let my job consume me, and I didn't always make you feel valued. But that doesn't excuse what you did. "I know," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I was looking for validation, and I shouldn't have. I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't go too far, but I was wrong." "Why didn't you come to me when you were feeling this way?" I asked, frustration creeping into my tone. "Why not talk to me about your feelings?" "I was scared," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you, and I thought I could fix it myself, but I ended up making it worse. I'm so sorry for that." As she spoke, I felt my anger begin to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of empathy. "It's hard to hear this, but I appreciate your honesty," I said. "I know we both have things we need to work on." "Can we move forward together?" Laura asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to lose you, James." I took a deep breath, weighing my words carefully. "I want to try, but we need to be open about our feelings, and I need to know that you're fully committed to making this work." "I am," she replied earnestly. "I'll do anything to earn back your trust." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling over us. It was a turning point, a necessary step toward healing. After a while, I continued, "We need to focus on building our emotional connection again. Maybe we should schedule regular date nights or activities that we used to enjoy together." "I'd love that," she said, a small smile breaking through her sadness. "We can even try to recreate some of our favorite memories. Let's start with a walk in the park tomorrow," I suggested. "Just the two of us." "I can't wait," she replied, her eyes lighting up. As we discussed our plans, I felt a sense of hope blooming within me. We were finally addressing the root of our issues, and it felt like we were taking steps toward a healthier relationship. That evening, we decided to go for a casual dinner at a nearby restaurant. It was a simple outing, but it felt monumental given the circumstances. As we shared a meal, we laughed and reminisced about our early days together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of normalcy returning. But even in the light of laughter, I couldn't shake the weight of the past entirely. I knew it would take time to rebuild our relationship, and while we were making progress, there were still many challenges ahead. After dinner, as we walked home under the stars, I held Laura's hand tightly. I was reminded that healing wasn't linear. It would be a journey filled with ups and downs. But as long as we faced it together, I believed we could emerge stronger on the other side. The following day, the sun shone brightly as Laura and I set out for our walk in the park. It was a beautiful Saturday, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. As we strolled along the winding paths, hand in hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of renewed hope. We talked about everything and nothing, allowing the lightness of the moment to wash over us. Laughter came easier now, and I cherished each smile exchanged between us. We paused at a small pond where ducks paddled lazily, and I pointed out their antics to Laura. "Look at that one. He's trying to impress the female," I joked, eliciting a giggle from her. It was moments like these that reminded me of why I fell in love with her in the first place. As we continued our walk, I suddenly spotted a familiar face approaching from the opposite direction. It was Matt. My heart raced as I tensed up, my grip on Laura's hand tightening instinctively. "James," Matt called out, a smirk spreading across his face as he approached us. "Didn't expect to see you here." I forced a smile, trying to remain calm despite the surge of anger that boiled within me. "What are you doing here, Matt?" I replied, my voice steady. "Just out for a stroll," he said, glancing at Laura. "And you, enjoying the sunshine?" "Yeah, just taking some time to reconnect," I said, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. Laura shifted slightly beside me, clearly uncomfortable. "We should get going," she said, looking up at me with concern. But Matt wasn't ready to let the encounter end. "You two look cozy," he remarked, feigning casualness. "Glad to see you're doing well, Laura." I could see Laura's expression shift as she forced a smile. "Thanks, Matt. It's been a journey." "Oh, I can imagine," he replied, a hint of sarcasm creeping into his tone. "Just remember, some journeys lead to unexpected places." At that moment, I felt a wave of protective anger wash over me. "You should keep your distance, Matt. Laura and I are working on our relationship." Matt raised an eyebrow, his smirk deepening. "Sure thing, James. Just make sure you don't lose track of what really matters. Relationships can be fragile, you know?" The jab stung, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me react. "We're aware of that," I replied, my voice firm, "and I'd appreciate it if you respected our space." Laura's hand tightened around mine, and I could feel the tension radiating from her. "We should really go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, let's not prolong this," I said, turning slightly to lead Laura away from Matt. But as we walked past him, I could feel his eyes on us, a mix of amusement and arrogance that made my skin crawl. Once we were a safe distance away, I glanced at Laura, who was visibly shaken. "Are you okay?" I asked, concerned. "I just didn't expect to see him," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought I was done with that chapter of my life." "I know," I said, trying to offer comfort. "But we can't let him get to us. We're stronger than that. I just hate that he can still affect me like this," she confessed, looking down at the ground. "It makes me feel weak." "You're not weak, Laura," I assured her. "You're doing everything you can to make things right." This was just a bump in the road. As we continued our walk, I could sense the shift in our mood. The pleasant atmosphere had been tainted by the encounter, and I could see that it lingered in Laura's thoughts. "Maybe we should talk about what just happened," I suggested gently. "Yeah, I think we should," she replied, her voice subdued. I thought I was past all this, but seeing him brought back a lot of feelings. "What kind of feelings?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Confusion mostly, she said, biting her lip. I felt guilty for what I did, but also angry at him for putting me in that position. I thought I was ready to move on, but now I'm not so sure. I nodded, understanding her struggle. It's normal to have mixed emotions. Just remember, you're with me now. We're working together to move past this. I know and I want to, she said earnestly. I just need to figure out how to deal with the fallout. As we walked in silence, I reflected on how this unexpected encounter could either tear us apart or push us closer together. I wanted to believe we could overcome the challenges ahead. Later that evening, we returned home, both feeling drained from the day's events. As we settled on the couch, I wrapped my arm around Laura, pulling her close. Let's watch something lighthearted, I suggested, trying to lighten the mood. She smiled faintly, leaning her head against my shoulder. That sounds perfect. We flicked through a few options until we settled on a comedy. As we laughed at the antics on screen, I could feel the tension slowly dissipating. I knew we still had a long way to go, but each moment we spent together, working through our challenges, felt like a step in the right direction. Later that night, as we turned off the lights and settled into bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter with Matt had forced us to confront our past more deeply. It had been a setback, but it also served as a reminder of the commitment we had made to one another. I love you, Laura, I whispered as I turned to face her. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. I love you too, James, she replied, her voice soft but firm, and I'm ready to keep fighting for us. With those words hanging in the air, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We were in this together, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them as a team. The following week brought a new chapter in our journey, our first couples therapy session. I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as we prepared to meet with Dr. Smith, a well-respected therapist known for helping couples navigate the tumultuous waters of betrayal and trust issues. Laura and I spent the morning discussing what we hope to achieve in therapy. I think we need to learn how to communicate better, she said, her voice tinged with anxiety. I want to be able to express my feelings without fearing how you'll react. I agree, I replied. I want to create a space where we can be honest with each other, even when it's uncomfortable. We need to rebuild that trust. As the time for our appointment approached, I could feel my heart racing. What if we unearthed more pain than we were prepared to handle? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was a necessary step in our healing process. When we arrived at Dr. Smith's office, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The waiting room was cozy, adorned with warm colors and soft lighting. There were comfortable chairs arranged in a circle, creating an inviting atmosphere. Are you ready? Laura asked, her eyes searching mine. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, offering her a reassuring smile. After a few minutes, Dr. Smith called us into her office. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, instantly putting us at ease. Welcome. I'm so glad you both could make it today, she said, gesturing for us to take a seat. Thank you, I said, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. Let's start by talking about why you're here, Dr. Smith suggested, her tone inviting yet professional. I'd love to hear each of your perspectives. I glanced at Laura, encouraging her to go first. Well, I think we're here because my infidelity has caused a lot of pain and mistrust in our relationship, she began, her voice shaky. I want to understand what went wrong and how we can fix it. That's a brave start, Dr. Smith replied. James, what about you? I'm here because I want to rebuild our relationship, I said, my voice steady. But I also want to understand how we got to this point. I feel hurt and betrayed, and I need to work through those feelings. Dr. Smith nodded thoughtfully. It sounds like both of you are committed to the process, which is a great sign. Healing takes time and effort, but it's entirely possible. As we continued to talk, Dr. Smith guided us through our emotions, encouraging us to articulate our thoughts without judgment. I spoke about the pain of betrayal and the feelings of inadequacy that had arisen from Laura's affair. I could see her eyes well up with tears as I shared my feelings, and it broke my heart to see her hurting. I never wanted to hurt you, James, Laura said, her voice trembling. I felt lost and didn't know how to ask for help. I thought I could manage it alone, but I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I know you're sorry, and I appreciate you saying that, I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. but I need to understand why you felt you couldn't come to me. That's what I'm trying to figure out, she admitted. I think I was afraid of being vulnerable. I didn't want to burden you with my feelings. Vulnerability is tough for both of us, Dr. Smith interjected. But it's essential in a relationship. It's how we connect and build trust. How do you both feel about expressing your emotions to one another? I want to be open, but I also worry about how he'll react, Laura admitted, glancing at me. I worry about that too, I confessed. I want to support you, but I also don't want to get hurt again. Those are valid concerns, Dr. Smith said. Establishing a safe space for vulnerability is critical. It might help to create a set of ground rules for how you communicate during these sessions. Laura and I exchanged glances, contemplating the idea. That makes sense, I said. We could agree to listen without interrupting and validate each other's feelings. Exactly, Dr. Smith encouraged. Being able to express yourself freely will help you both understand one another better. As the session progressed, we dove deeper into the underlying issues that had contributed to our struggles. We spoke about the pressures of work, the demands of life, and how they had eroded our connection over time. I think we lost sight of what made us a team, I said, reflecting on our conversation. We got so caught up in our individual lives that we forgot to prioritize each other. Laura nodded in agreement. It's like we took each other for granted. I want to change that. Dr. Smith smiled gently. Recognizing the problem is the first step. Now, let's talk about how you can start reconnecting. What activities did you enjoy doing together before? We spent the rest of the session brainstorming ways to rekindle our connection. We talked about date nights, exploring new hobbies, and even revisiting some of our favorite places. As we left the session, I felt a sense of relief and renewed hope. It was clear we had a lot of work ahead, but I was optimistic about the progress we were making. I'm glad we came, I said, glancing at Laura as we walked to the car. It felt good to talk openly. Me too, she replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. I think we're on the right path. As we drove home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We were no longer shying away from the difficult conversations. We were facing our problems head on, and I believed that was the key to healing our relationship. That night, as we prepared for bed, I took a moment to reflect on our session. I'm proud of us, I said, turning to Laura. We're really trying to make this work. I'm proud of us too, she replied, her smile genuine. This is just the beginning, but I can feel the shift already. With those words, I felt a flicker of hope reignite within me. Together, we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as I held Laura close, I knew we had taken another crucial step on our journey toward healing and rebuilding our love. As the days passed after our therapy session, I could feel the gradual shift in our dynamic. There was a renewed sense of purpose in our conversations and an eagerness to reconnect in ways we hadn't before. We started implementing the suggestions from Dr. Smith, making a conscious effort to prioritize our relationship. One afternoon, I suggested we revisit an old hobby we both enjoyed, hiking. It had been years since we had taken a trail together, and I remembered how much we used to love exploring the outdoors. Remember that time we hiked up to the waterfall and had a picnic? I asked, a smile creeping onto my face. Laura's eyes lit up. How could I forget? You almost slipped and fell trying to take a picture. I chuckled, remembering the moment vividly. And you laughed so hard that you nearly dropped the sandwiches. We should do that again, she said, her enthusiasm contagious. Let's plan a day trip this weekend. As the week progressed, we both felt a palpable excitement in the air. It was as if we were rediscovering the joys of being together. The following Saturday, we packed our backpacks with snacks, water, and a camera, ready for our adventure. The drive to the hiking trail was filled with lighthearted banter and laughter. I could feel the tension from our past beginning to fade, replaced by the ease of companionship. We played our favorite songs and sang along, enjoying the freedom of the open road. When we arrived at the trailhead, I could hardly contain my excitement. The sun was shining brightly, and the sound of chirping birds filled the air. This is perfect, I said, taking a deep breath of the fresh pine-scented air. Laura smiled as she adjusted her backpack. I've missed this. I didn't realize how much I needed to be outdoors. We set off on the trail, the path winding through tall trees and vibrant wildflowers. With each step, I could feel the weight of the past slowly lifting. We chatted about our week, sharing stories and laughter, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly connected to her. As we reached a clearing, we paused to take in the breathtaking view of the valley below. "Wow, it's even more beautiful than I remember," Laura said, her eyes sparkling with wonder. "Let's take a picture," I suggested, pulling out my phone. I set it up on a nearby rock and joined her in the frame, both of us grinning like kids. "Say cheese." "Cheese," we echoed, and I captured the moment. After a few more snapshots, we settled on a nearby log to enjoy our picnic. As we unpacked our sandwiches and snacks, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We were just two people, enjoying each other's company without the weight of the past hanging over us. "Do you remember how we used to plan these elaborate picnics?" Laura asked, reminiscing. "We'd make all sorts of gourmet sandwiches and fancy desserts." I chuckled. "Yeah, and half the time, we'd end up eating peanut butter and jelly anyway." "Hey, there's nothing wrong with a classic." She laughed. We dug into our lunch, and as we ate, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our dreams, our goals, and even some silly plans for the future. I felt as if we were rediscovering the foundation of our relationship, one laugh at a time. After we finished eating, I suggested we take a short hike to the waterfall we had visited years ago. "Let's see if we can find it," I said, my excitement evident. "I'm in," Laura replied, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. As we made our way along the trail, we shared stories from our past, each memory reigniting the warmth and connection we had almost lost. The sound of rushing water grew louder as we approached the waterfall, and I could feel my heart racing with anticipation. When we finally reached it, I was taken aback by how beautiful it still was. The water cascaded down the rocks, sparkling in the sunlight. "This is just as amazing as I remember," I said, looking at Laura. She grinned, taking in the scenery. "It feels like we're back in time." We stood together, soaking in the beauty of the moment, and I felt a swell of emotion. "I'm so glad we did this," I said, turning to her. "It feels good to reconnect like this." "I agree," she replied, her voice softening. "I've missed this side of US. Suddenly, an idea struck me. "Let's do something fun," I said, pulling her closer. "How about we take off our shoes and dip our toes in the water?" Laura laughed, clearly surprised. "Are you serious?" "It's freezing. Come on, it'll be fun," I urged, already taking off my shoes. "Just a quick dip." After a moment's hesitation, she joined me, laughing as she kicked off her shoes. We approached the water, the cold sensation sending shivers up our legs. "This is insane," she squealed, giggling as she stepped closer. I laughed, splashing her playfully. "See? Isn't this refreshing?" She squealed, trying to dodge the water, but it was too late. I managed to get her good, and soon we were both laughing uncontrollably, splashing each other like we did in the past. After a while, we collapsed onto the grass, breathless from laughter. "That was the best idea ever," Laura said, her face flushed with joy. "Definitely one for the books," I agreed, feeling a warmth spread through me. As we lay there, side by side, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for this moment. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue across the landscape, and I knew that this day would remain etched in my memory for years to come. "I love you, Laura," I said softly, turning to face her. "I love you too, James," she replied, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. In that moment, I realized that while we still had challenges to overcome, we were moving in the right direction. Together, we were rebuilding our relationship, one shared experience at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of hope blossom within me. We were learning to reconnect, to appreciate each other's company, and to face the future together. It was a journey, but it was one I was determined to take with her by my side. As the days passed after our therapy session, I could feel the gradual shift in our dynamic. There was a renewed sense of purpose in our conversations and an eagerness to reconnect in ways we hadn't before. We started implementing the suggestions from Dr. Smith, making a conscious effort to prioritize our relationship. One afternoon, I suggested we revisit an old hobby we both enjoyed, hiking. It had been years since we had taken a trail together, and I remembered how much we used to love exploring the outdoors. "Remember that time we hiked up to the waterfall and had a picnic?" I asked, a smile creeping onto my face. Laura's eyes lit up. "How could I forget? You almost slipped and fell trying to take a picture. I chuckled, remembering the moment vividly. And you laughed so hard that you nearly dropped the sandwiches. We should do that again, she said, her enthusiasm contagious. Let's plan a day trip this weekend. As the week progressed, we both felt a palpable excitement in the air. It was as if we were rediscovering the joys of being together. The following Saturday, we packed our backpacks with snacks, water, and a camera, ready for our adventure. The drive to the hiking trail was filled with lighthearted banter and laughter. I could feel the tension from our past beginning to fade, replaced by the ease of companionship. We played our favorite songs and sang along, enjoying the freedom of the open road. When we arrived at the trailhead, I could hardly contain my excitement. The sun was shining brightly, and the sound of chirping birds filled the air. This is perfect, I said, taking a deep breath of the fresh pine-scented air. Laura smiled as she adjusted her backpack. I've missed this. I didn't realize how much I needed to be outdoors. We set off on the trail, the path winding through tall trees and vibrant wildflowers. With each step, I could feel the weight of the past slowly lifting. We chatted about our week, sharing stories and laughter, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly connected to her. As we reached a clearing, we paused to take in the breathtaking view of the valley below. Wow, it's even more beautiful than I remember, Laura said, her eyes sparkling with wonder. Let's take a picture, I suggested, pulling out my phone. I set it up on a nearby rock and joined her in the frame, both of us grinning like kids. Say cheese. Cheese, we echoed, and I captured the moment. After a few more snapshots, we settled on a nearby log to enjoy our picnic. As we unpacked our sandwiches and snacks, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We were just two people, enjoying each other's company without the weight of the past hanging over us. Do you remember how we used to plan these elaborate picnics? Laura asked, reminiscing. We'd make all sorts of gourmet sandwiches and fancy desserts. I chuckled. Yeah, and half the time, we'd end up eating peanut butter and jelly anyway. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a classic. She laughed. We dug into our lunch, and as we ate, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our dreams, our goals, and even some silly plans for the future. I felt as if we were rediscovering the foundation of our relationship, one laugh at a time. After we finished eating, I suggested we take a short hike to the waterfall we had visited years ago. Let's see if we can find it, I said, my excitement evident. I'm in, Laura replied, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. As we made our way along the trail, we shared stories from our past, each memory reigniting the warmth and connection we had almost lost. The sound of rushing water grew louder as we approached the waterfall, and I could feel my heart racing with anticipation. When we finally reached it, I was taken aback by how beautiful it still was. The water cascaded down the rocks, sparkling in the sunlight. This is just as amazing as I remember, I said, looking at Laura. She grinned, taking in the scenery. It feels like we're back in time. We stood together, soaking in the beauty of the moment, and I felt a swell of emotion. I'm so glad we did this, I said, turning to her. It feels good to reconnect like this. I agree, she replied, her voice softening. I've missed this side of US. Suddenly, an idea struck me. Let's do something fun, I said, pulling her closer. How about we take off our shoes and dip our toes in the water? Laura laughed, clearly surprised. Are you serious? It's freezing. Come on, it'll be fun, I urged, already taking off my shoes. Just a quick dip. After a moment's hesitation, she joined me, laughing as she kicked off her shoes. We approached the water, the cold sensation sending shivers up our legs. This is insane, she squealed, giggling as she stepped closer. I laughed, splashing her playfully. See? Isn't this refreshing? She squealed, trying to dodge the water, but it was too late. I managed to get her good, and soon we were both laughing uncontrollably, splashing each other like we did in the past. After a while, we collapsed onto the grass, breathless from laughter. That was the best idea ever, Laura said, her face flushed with joy. Definitely one for the books, I agreed, feeling a warmth spread through me. As we lay there, side by side, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for this moment. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue across the landscape, and I knew that this day would remain etched in my memory for years to come. I love you, Laura, I said softly, turning to face her. I love you too, James, she replied, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. In that moment, I realized that while we still had challenges to overcome, we were moving in the right direction. Together, we were rebuilding our relationship, one shared experience at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of hope blossom within me. We were learning to reconnect, to appreciate each other's company, and to face the future together. It was a journey, but it was one I was determined to take with her by my side. As the weeks passed, Laura and I continued to attend therapy sessions with Dr. Smith. Each meeting felt like peeling back layers of an onion, revealing truths about ourselves and our relationship that we had long ignored. While the process was often painful, it also offered a sense of liberation, an opportunity to confront the demons of our past. One afternoon, as we drove home from a session, I turned to Laura, feeling a knot of apprehension in my stomach. "Do you think we're ready to talk about your affair in detail? I mean, the whole truth?" She hesitated, her eyes focused on the road. "I want to, but I'm scared." "What if it just hurts you more?" "I think it's necessary," I replied, my voice steady but gentle. "If we're going to move forward, we need to understand everything, not just the surface stuff." Laura sighed, clearly torn. "Okay, I want to be open with you. I don't want to hide anymore." That evening, we settled onto the couch, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the room. I could feel the tension in the air, a heavy weight pressing down on us. I took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for what was to come. "Do you want to start?" I asked, my heart racing. "Sure," she said, nervously twisting her fingers. "I guess it all began when I started feeling overwhelmed at work. I felt like I was drowning in responsibilities, and I didn't know how to cope. I was so stressed that I became distant, even from you." "I remember you seemed off," I admitted, "but I didn't realize how deep it went." "Yeah," she continued, her voice trembling. "That's when I met Greg. At first it was just friendly. We would chat during lunch breaks, and I felt like I could finally breathe. He listened to me, and I felt understood. I didn't intend for it to go beyond that." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "So when did it become more than just friendship?" Laura's eyes filled with tears. I wish I could pinpoint an exact moment. It just happened. One day we were working late together, and it felt like all my frustrations spilled out. He was there, and I let my guard down. I felt a connection, a spark, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Her words cut deep, but I tried to remain calm. "Did you ever think about how it would affect me, our marriage?" "Of course," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "But I was so caught up in my own pain that I didn't stop to think about the consequences. I was selfish." "Selfish," I repeated quietly, feeling the weight of that word settle over us. "How did it escalate? I need to know." "We started texting more frequently," she confessed, "and then it turned into secret meetings. I told myself it was just a fling, that it wouldn't go anywhere, but it did. I crossed a line I can never take back." "Did you ever love him?" I asked, the question burning in my throat. Laura looked down, shame washing over her face. "No, I didn't love him. It was never about love. It was about escape, a way to avoid facing my problems. I thought I could find solace in someone else." I closed my eyes, trying to process her admission. "And when you realized it was wrong, what did you feel?" "I felt trapped," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to stop. I was terrified of what you would think if you found out, but I also hated myself for doing it. I felt like I was living a lie." I took a moment to collect my thoughts. "So why did you finally come clean?" "Because I couldn't keep living in the shadows," she replied. "The guilt was suffocating me. I knew I had to be honest with you, even if it meant losing everything. You deserve to know the truth." Tears rolled down her cheeks, and I felt a mixture of sadness and anger surge within me. "It's hard for me to understand why you didn't come to me when you were struggling," I said, my voice trembling. "I wanted to help you." "I was ashamed," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "I didn't want to burden you. I thought I could fix it on my own, but I was wrong." Silence hung heavily between us as we processed everything that had been said. The air felt charged with emotions, regret, sadness, and a flicker of hope. "I don't want to lose you, James," Laura finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." "I want to believe you," I replied, my heart aching. "But it's going to take time." "I know," she said, her expression earnest. "I'm ready to put in the work. I'll do anything to rebuild your trust. As we sat together, the weight of our conversation hung heavy in the air. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was a turning point for us, a chance to truly heal. "Let's keep talking," I suggested, my voice softening. "We have a long road ahead, but I believe we can make it if we're both committed." Laura nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "I promise I'll be honest from now on. No more secrets." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "We can work through this together." That night, as we went to bed, I felt a renewed sense of determination. It wouldn't be easy, but we were finally facing the truth, and that was a vital step toward healing. We were beginning to confront the pain head on, and I hoped that together we could rebuild what had been broken. With that thought in mind, I closed my eyes, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in a long while. We were on a journey, one that required both of us to be brave, honest, and committed. And I was ready to take that journey with her, one step at a time. Just when I thought we were making progress, the past had a way of sneaking up on us. A few days after our deep conversation, I was at work, trying to focus on my tasks, when I received an unexpected message. It was from Greg. The notification popped up on my phone, and my heart sank. I had hoped I would never have to hear from him again. He sent a simple message: "Can we talk? It's important." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. What could he possibly want? Part of me wanted to ignore it entirely, to pretend it never happened. But another part of me knew that this could be an opportunity to confront him directly, to get answers. I debated with myself for a few minutes before finally deciding to respond. "What do you want?" Almost immediately he replied, "Can we meet? There's something I need to explain." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I wasn't sure if I wanted to confront him, but I felt I owed it to myself and Laura to understand where he stood. After a few moments of hesitation, I agreed to meet him at a local coffee shop. As I drove to the cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread settling in my stomach. Part of me felt empowered. I was finally going to face the man who had threatened my marriage. But another part of me was terrified of what he might say. I arrived a few minutes early and sat at a table near the back, trying to calm my racing heart. When Greg walked in, I immediately recognized him, though I hadn't seen him since the affair came to light. He looked just as I remembered, with his confident demeanor and an easy smile that had once charmed Laura. He spotted me and made his way over, his expression shifting from casual to serious as he approached. "James," he said, taking a seat across from me. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." I nodded, trying to maintain my composure. "Let's get to the point. What do you want?" Greg hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I wanted to talk about Laura and what happened between us." I leaned forward, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You don't get to act like you care about her now. You broke my trust and messed up our lives." "I know," he said, his tone surprisingly remorseful. "I'm not trying to make excuses for my actions. I regret what I did, and I want to take responsibility." "Responsibility?" I scoffed, crossing my arms. "What does that even mean? You had no right to interfere in our marriage." "I know," he repeated, running a hand through his hair. "But I need you to understand something. It wasn't just about the thrill for me. I genuinely thought I was helping her." "Helping her?" I snapped. "By sleeping with her?" Greg's expression hardened slightly, but he didn't back down. "Look, I didn't go into this wanting to hurt you or her. Laura was struggling, and I was there. It was a mistake, but she confided in me. I felt like I was being a friend to her when she needed one." His words infuriated me, but they also sparked a flicker of doubt. "So what's your point? You're not helping anything now by sitting here." "I just want to apologize," he said, meeting my gaze with a steady look. "I never meant to cause so much pain. I regret everything, but I also think Laura deserves a chance to explain herself fully without my influence." His honesty was disarming, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to believe him, but something about his demeanor made me pause. "Why should I trust anything you say?" "Because I'm willing to step back," Greg replied earnestly. "I don't want to be the reason your marriage falls apart. I want to make it right by being honest and staying out of the picture." I took a deep breath, processing his words. "So you're just going to walk away?" "I want to," he said, his voice softening, "but I think you and Laura need to have an open conversation about what happened." I'm willing to support that in any way I can. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Part of me wanted to lash out to demand he never contact Laura again. But another part recognized that maybe this was an opportunity for closure, both for me and for Laura. Why now? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Why this sudden change of heart? Because I've realized that what I did was wrong and I don't want to be that person anymore, he said, his sincerity shining through. I know it's too late to fix things, but I want to at least try to do the right thing from now on. The conversation lingered heavily in the air, and I weighed my options carefully. If you really mean what you're saying, then leave Laura alone. Let her and me work on our marriage. Agreed, Greg replied, nodding solemnly. I won't contact her again, but if she reaches out, I'll respect her decision. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. If I see that you've crossed any boundaries, I won't hesitate to come after you. Fair enough, he said, a hint of respect in his tone. After a few more minutes of tense conversation, we parted ways, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. I didn't trust Greg, but maybe, just maybe, he was genuine about wanting to do the right thing. When I got home, I found Laura in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of something delicious wafted through the air, but my mind was elsewhere. Hey, she said, looking up with a smile. How did it go? I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. We need to talk. Her expression shifted as she sensed the seriousness in my voice. What happened? I recounted our conversation, her eyes widening with each revelation. He's going to stay out of our lives from now on, I finished, my heart pounding. But I want to know how you feel about it. Laura's brow furrowed, and she took a moment to process everything. I can't believe he reached out to you. It's surprising. I know, I said, crossing my arms, but I think it's an opportunity for us to finally move on. I hope so, she replied softly. I want us to heal, but I don't know if I can fully trust him, or even if I can fully trust myself. We'll figure it out together, I assured her, feeling a flicker of hope. Let's keep communicating, no matter how difficult it gets. We can't let him come between us again. Laura nodded, her eyes searching mine. I'm committed to that, James. I want to rebuild what we lost. And with that, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were ready to face whatever challenges lay before us, together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions, but I felt a sense of resolve that hadn't been there before. Laura and I dove into rebuilding our relationship, attending therapy sessions diligently and working on honest communication. The more we talked, the clearer it became that we were both willing to do the hard work required to heal. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find Laura in the living room, surrounded by magazines and sticky notes. It looked like she was planning something, and I couldn't help but smile at her focused demeanor. Hey, I said, setting my bag down. What's all this? Laura looked up, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I wanted to surprise you. I thought we could plan a weekend getaway. Just the two of us, somewhere to reconnect. My heart warmed at the idea. That sounds amazing. Where are we thinking? I found a beautiful cabin in the woods, she said, pointing to a magazine with pictures of a rustic retreat surrounded by nature. It's secluded, perfect for getting away from everything. Wow, that looks incredible, I replied, feeling a surge of hope. When do you want to go? Next weekend, if that works for you, she suggested, biting her lip in anticipation. Absolutely. I could use a break, I said, imagining us away from the stress and distractions of everyday life. Let's make it happen. Over the next few days, we excitedly prepared for our getaway. We packed our bags, loaded up the car with supplies, and made a playlist of our favorite songs. It felt good to have something to look forward to, a chance to reset and focus on each other. As we drove to the cabin, I felt the tension of the past weeks slowly dissipate. The air grew fresher, the landscape more beautiful, and I could see Laura's excitement reflected in her smile. We laughed and reminisced about our early days together, sharing stories that reminded us of why we fell in love in the first place. When we finally arrived at the cabin, I was in awe of the serene surroundings. The rustic charm of the place was welcoming, and the view of the trees and mountains was breathtaking. It felt like a world away from our problems. Welcome to our home for the weekend, Laura said, beaming as she unlocked the door. We stepped inside, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The cabin was cozy, with a fireplace and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. I could see us making new memories here. "Let's unpack and get settled," I suggested, feeling a sense of eagerness. "Then we can explore a bit." Once we unpacked, we decided to go for a walk in the surrounding woods. The sound of crunching leaves under our feet and the chirping of birds filled the air as we wandered along the trails. "Isn't this amazing?" Laura said, looking around with wide eyes. "I love the sound of nature." "It really is," I replied, taking in the beauty around us. "I'm glad we did this." As we walked, the conversation turned to lighter topics, favorite movies, silly memories, and our dreams for the future. I felt a sense of camaraderie growing between us, a renewed bond that I had almost forgotten existed. That night, after cooking a simple dinner together, we settled in front of the fireplace, its warm glow illuminating the room. Laura curled up next to me, and I wrapped my arm around her, feeling a sense of contentment. "Do you remember our first trip together?" she asked, a playful smile on her face. "Of course, we got lost on the way to the beach and ended up at that random diner," I laughed, remembering the ridiculous detour that had turned into an adventure. "And we ended up bonding over that awful coffee and the weirdest menu," she added, giggling. "It was a disaster, but we made the best of it," I said, feeling nostalgic. "We've always had a knack for turning mishaps into memories." We continued to reminisce, and as the fire crackled, I felt a sense of safety wash over me. I was grateful for this moment, for the warmth of Laura beside me, and the hope that we could rebuild our love. As the night wore on, I felt the conversation shift. "James," Laura said, her tone more serious, "I know we're moving forward, but I want to talk about the future. How do we ensure we don't slip back into old habits?" I took a deep breath, understanding the importance of her question. We need to keep communicating openly. No more hiding things from each other, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. "Agreed," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "I want us to have a strong foundation, to trust each other again. We can do this," I assured her, "but we also have to be patient. It's going to take time to heal fully." Laura nodded, her expression earnest. "I'm committed to this, James. I want us to be better, to be stronger together." As we sat together in silence, I realized how far we had come. We had faced the truth, confronted our past, and were now taking steps to build a future. That weekend became a turning point for us, a reminder of our love and the commitment we shared. By the time we returned home, I felt lighter, more optimistic. The journey ahead would still have its challenges, but with each passing day, we were proving that love could withstand even the hardest trials. And as long as we continued to communicate and support each other, I believed we could make it through anything together. The weeks that followed our getaway were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Laura and I continued to prioritize our relationship, attending therapy sessions and dedicating time to each other. We were committed to rebuilding our trust and creating a stronger foundation for our future. But amidst this newfound happiness, I couldn't shake the feeling that unresolved issues lingered, especially regarding Greg. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find Laura sitting at the kitchen table, her face etched with concern. The warmth of the house seemed to contrast with the tension in the air. "Hey," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "What's going on?" She looked up, her expression serious. "I received a message from Greg today. My stomach dropped. What did he want?" "He just wanted to check in on me," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "He said he's been thinking a lot about what happened and wanted to make sure I'm okay." "Are you serious?" I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "After everything that's happened, he thinks he can just reach out to you like that?" "I know it's surprising," she said, holding up her hands. "But he did apologize again and said he respects our boundaries. I thought you should know." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Look, I appreciate that you're being honest with me, but I don't want him in your life, even if he claims to be respectful. I understand that, James, but I'm not a child. I can handle this," she replied firmly. "I want to have some closure, not just sweep everything under the rug." I stared at her, torn between understanding her need for closure and my instinct to protect our relationship. "But how can we move forward if he's still lurking in the background?" Laura paused, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not saying I want to engage with him, but I think it's important for us to address this head on. If we don't, it might come back to haunt us." Her words hit home, and I realized she was right. Avoiding the issue wouldn't solve anything. If anything, it could create more tension between us. I don't want to feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, I admitted, my voice softer. You have to understand how difficult this is for me. I do, she said gently, and I appreciate that you're being honest about your feelings. But I want you to know that you're my priority now. I chose you. Her reassurance made me feel slightly better, but I still struggled with the thought of Greg being in the picture, even just as a ghost from our past. How do you want to handle it then? I asked, willing to compromise. I think it might be best if I respond to him, she suggested, just to clarify our boundaries and let him know that I'm not interested in maintaining any kind of relationship. I'll keep it simple. I hesitated, contemplating the potential fallout. Are you sure you want to do that? Yes, she said with conviction. I need to take control of this situation for both of us. I don't want you to feel threatened by him anymore. Okay, I relented, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. But I want to see what you send before you hit send. Laura smiled, and I could see the determination in her eyes. Deal. That evening, she drafted a message to Greg, carefully outlining her feelings and reinforcing our commitment to each other. I watched as she typed, occasionally glancing at me for approval. When she finished, she turned the screen toward me. What do you think? I read the message, feeling a sense of pride in her assertiveness. It's perfect. You're being clear and direct without being confrontational. She took a deep breath and hit send, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. There, it's done. We sat together in silence for a moment, and I could feel the weight of the situation beginning to lift. I'm proud of you, I said, squeezing her hand. You handled that really well. Thanks, she replied, a smile creeping across her face. I just want to move on. As the days passed, I felt a shift in our dynamic. The tension that had loomed over us began to dissipate, and we settled into a routine that felt healthy and supportive. Laura's decision to confront Greg had empowered us both, and I could see the positive effects in her demeanor. But then, a week later, as I was getting ready for work, I noticed Laura staring at her phone with a concerned expression. What's wrong? I asked, my heart racing at the thought that Greg had reached out again. I got a reply from Greg, she said, her voice shaky. Did he say anything inappropriate? I asked, anxiety creeping in. No, nothing like that, she replied quickly. He just said he respects my decision, but he wants to talk in person to clear the air. He mentioned that he needs closure too. My blood boiled. No way, you're not meeting him. James, please, Laura said, her tone pleading. I understand your anger, but I think it might be beneficial for both of us. If we can lay everything out on the table, it might help us truly move on. No, it's not worth the risk, I countered, frustration bubbling to the surface again. He had his chance. We're trying to build a life together, not reopen old wounds. I'm not doing this to hurt you, she insisted, her voice rising slightly. I just want to have a final conversation. I promise I won't let him manipulate me again. I ran my hands through my hair, torn between trusting Laura's judgment and fearing the potential consequences. What if he tries to pull you back in? What if he plays on your emotions? Laura stepped closer, her expression earnest. I won't let that happen. I'm stronger now. I know what I want. We locked eyes, and for a moment, I could see her determination shining through. But my gut was still telling me this was a mistake. Okay, I finally relented, but I want to be there when you talk to him. I need to know you're safe. Laura nodded slowly, her relief evident. I think that's fair. I wouldn't want to do this without you anyway. We spent the next few days preparing for the meeting, discussing what we both wanted to say. When the day finally arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination as we drove to the coffee shop where they would meet. As we pulled into the parking lot, I could see Greg waiting outside. He looked casual, but also tense, his eyes darting around as if he was nervous about what lay ahead. Are you ready? I asked Laura, gripping the steering wheel. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. As ready as I'll ever be. We stepped out of the car and approached Greg, who stood up as we approached. Thanks for agreeing to meet, he said, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. Let's get this over with, I said, my voice firm. Laura shot me a glance, and I could tell she appreciated my support. We found a small table in the corner, and as we sat down, I watched Greg closely, ready to intervene if things escalated. Laura, I really appreciate you being willing to talk, Greg began, looking genuinely remorseful. I'm here because I want to clarify boundaries, Laura said, her voice steady. We're both committed to moving on with our lives, and I want to make sure you respect that. Of course, he replied, nodding earnestly. I never meant to create any more issues between you two. I regret everything that happened. You say that now, but actions speak louder than words, I interjected, my protective instincts kicking in. This is about more than just words. It's about trust. I understand that, Greg said, raising his hands in a placating manner. I'm not here to disrupt your lives. I genuinely want you both to be happy. Laura nodded. I believe you, but it's going to take time for us to fully trust you again. I need you to respect our wishes moving forward. I will, he promised, his expression sincere. I'll step back completely. You won't hear from me again unless it's absolutely necessary. We spent the next few minutes discussing the past, but Laura remained firm in her boundaries, reiterating that she didn't want to revisit any old feelings. I felt a sense of pride as she stood her ground, asserting her commitment to our marriage. After what felt like an eternity, Greg finally acknowledged the gravity of this situation. I think this is a good way for both of us to find closure, he said, standing up. I'm truly sorry for everything. As we left the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Laura had handled herself with grace and strength, and I could see the relief in her eyes. Thank you for being there, she said softly as we walked to the car. I couldn't have done it without you. Always, I replied, feeling a renewed sense of unity between us. We're in this together, no matter what. As we drove home, I knew that while the journey ahead would still be challenging, we had taken a significant step toward healing. We were finally free to build the life we wanted, leaving the past behind us. And for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely optimistic about our future. Together, we could overcome anything.